Here's a number that changes everything. $10,000. Not a million, not even 50,000. Just 10 grand sitting in your account, and suddenly your brain chemistry shifts. Your decision-making process transforms, and opportunities that were invisible before become crystal clear. This isn't motivational fluff. Neuroscientists have measured actual cortisol level drops in people who cross this threshold. Financial advisors call it the emergency fund effect, but it's really a complete psychological rewiring. Stick around, because what I'm about to show you will completely change how you think about saving money. And more importantly, why most people approach it backwards. Let's cut through the noise. Everyone obsesses over budgets, side hustles, and investment strategies. But here's what they're missing. The difference between someone who saves $10,000 and someone who never will has nothing to do with income. It's about identity transformation. Think about smokers who quit successfully versus those who fail repeatedly. The failures say, "I'm trying to quit smoking." The successes say, "I'm not a smoker anymore." See the difference? Same principle applies to money. People who hit $10,000 don't think, "I'm trying to save." They've become savers at their core. Picture this scenario. Your check engine light comes on. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, that little orange light might as well be a nuclear warning siren. Your heart rate spikes, your palms sweat, and you're immediately calculating whether you'll need to borrow from family, max out a credit card, or skip meals to afford repairs. Now imagine the exact same situation with $10,000 in your account. That check engine light becomes annoying. Just annoying. Not catastrophic, not panic-inducing, just an irritating inconvenience you'll handle next Tuesday. This shift from panic to annoyance sounds trivial, but it rewires your entire nervous system. When you're not flooded with stress hormones 50 times a day over minor financial bumps, your brain finally has bandwidth to think strategically. You sleep better. Not metaphorically, literally better. Studies show people with emergency funds report sleep quality improvements equivalent to what you'd get from prescription sleep medication. Your immune system strengthens because chronic stress isn't suppressing it anymore. You make better decisions at work because you're not mentally exhausted from constant financial calculations. Let's talk about something called decision fatigue. Every time you walk into a grocery store without savings, you're making hundreds of micro-calculations. Generic pasta or name brand? Regular milk or organic? Can I afford the good coffee this week? Each decision burns mental energy, and by evening, you're cognitively exhausted. Now here's the paradox. When you have $10,000 saved, you don't suddenly start buying expensive everything. Most people's grocery spending barely changes. What changes is the mental load. One person told me they almost cried the first time they shopped after hitting their savings goal, not because they bought caviar and champagne, because they realized they could choose what they wanted to eat instead of calculating what they could afford to eat. That's freedom most people don't even recognize they're missing until they taste it. You're not making survival-based decisions anymore. You're making preference-based decisions. And that shift frees up massive cognitive resources you didn't know you were wasting. Here's something wild about human psychology. Confidence isn't just a feeling, it's a signal that other people pick up on subconsciously. When you walk into a job interview knowing you have 10 grand in the bank, you're not desperate. You can afford to be selective. You can negotiate. You can walk away from lowball offers. And hiring managers sense this. They can't articulate why, but candidates who aren't financially desperate simply interview better. They maintain eye contact longer. They ask better questions. They negotiate more effectively. This creates a feedback loop. Better negotiations lead to higher salaries. Higher salaries make saving easier. Easier saving builds more confidence. More confidence creates better opportunities. I've watched people jump from $45,000 jobs to $65,000 jobs within 18 months of building their emergency fund. Not because they suddenly became more skilled, but because they finally had the psychological foundation to advocate for themselves properly. The money doesn't buy the confidence. The security enables the confidence. And the confidence unlocks opportunities that broke people never even see. Without savings, opportunities are invisible. Your buddy mentions a weekend certification course that could boost your income by $8,000 annually. Cost? $1,500. Without savings, this doesn't register as an opportunity. It registers as an impossible expense, so your brain filters it out completely. You literally don't see it as an option. But with $10,000 saved, that same certification course becomes an obvious investment. Your brain processes it completely differently. Same thing happens with networking events, professional conferences, even taking a day off to help a connection with their project. When you're financially strapped, these feel like luxuries you can't afford. When you have your foundation built, they feel like strategic investments in your future, earning potential. The opportunities were always there. What changed is your ability to recognize and act on them. This is why people with modest savings often leapfrog people with higher incomes but zero savings. The saver sees doors that the high earner doesn't even know exist. Let's get concrete about what $10,000 actually covers. Car transmission fails? $2,000 to $4,000. Medical emergency without great insurance? $1,000 to $6,000 depending on severity. Lose your job? With modest expenses, you've bought yourself 3 to 6 months of runway to find something good instead of accepting the first desperate offer. Home repair emergency? Covered. Unexpected travel for family crisis? Handled. Pet needs surgery? No problem. Here's the mathematical reality. Approximately 78% of financial emergencies that derail people cost less than $10,000. This means crossing this threshold makes you effectively immune to most financial disasters. You're not bulletproof, but you've eliminated the vast majority of scenarios that keep people trapped in the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. And once you're out of that cycle, acceleration happens naturally. Your first 1,000 takes forever. Your second 1,000 comes faster. By your 7th or 8th 1,000, saving feels almost automatic because you've completely rewired your financial habits and identity. Money stress doesn't just affect your bank account, it poisons your relationships. When you're constantly worried about finances, you avoid social situations. You decline dinner invitations and make awkward excuses. You feel embarrassed about your situation and become withdrawn. You might even develop resentment toward friends who seem more stable. This creates a spiral where financial stress leads to social isolation, which leads to worse mental health, which makes it even harder to improve your finances. But watch what happens when someone builds their emergency fund. Suddenly they're saying yes to coffee meetups again. They're attending events where they meet new people. They're more relaxed and present in conversations because they're not mentally calculating whether they can afford to split the check. Better social connections lead to better job opportunities, better romantic relationships, better support networks. Money doesn't buy happiness, but financial security removes a massive barrier to building the relationships that create happiness. Studies consistently show that people with emergency funds report significantly higher relationship satisfaction scores than those without savings. Here's something that will blow your mind. The person making $40,000 annually with $10,000 saved is objectively in a better financial position than someone making $120,000 with zero savings. Why? Because wealth isn't about earnings, it's about the gap between what you make and what you spend. I know doctors, lawyers, and tech workers pulling 6 figures who are constantly stressed about money. They drive $70,000 cars, live in expensive apartments, eat every meal at restaurants, and have nothing in the bank. Meanwhile, someone making a fraction of that income but living intentionally can build substantial wealth over time. The difference isn't intelligence or education, it's behavior and identity. Reaching $10,000 in savings forces you to develop the most valuable financial skill, distinguishing between wants and needs. You learn to reduce expenses without feeling deprived. You become creative about finding value. Most importantly, you develop patience and the ability to delay gratification, which is probably the single most predictive factor for long-term financial success. The high earner never learned these skills because they never had to. And that's why they're often one layoff away from financial disaster despite their impressive salary. Most people approach saving completely wrong. They wait until they can afford to save meaningful amounts. They think, I'll start saving when I can put away $500 a month. And they never start because that moment never comes. Here's the truth that nobody tells you. The amount you save initially is completely irrelevant. What matters is the identity shift that happens when you become someone who saves consistently. Start with $25. Start with $50. Hell, start with $10 if that's all you can manage. The magic isn't in the amount, it's in the consistency. Because here's what happens. That first month you save $50, your brain starts rewiring. You begin noticing small expenses you can cut without sacrifice. You get slightly more creative about generating extra income. You start thinking longer term instead of just surviving until Friday. And next month, maybe you save $75. Then $100. The amounts grow naturally as your identity as a saver solidifies. I've seen people go from "I can't save anything" to hitting their $10,000 goal in under 3 years, starting with tiny amounts. Not because they got raises or windfalls, but because the identity transformation created momentum that made saving progressively easier. The person who waits to save $500 monthly often never starts. The person who starts with $25 monthly often ends up saving way more than $500 within 18 months because they've become a completely different person. Let's talk about something uncomfortable. The average American spends over $3,000 annually on coffee shops, convenience purchases, and dining out. Not fancy restaurants, just routine convenience spending. Add in subscription services people barely use, premium cable packages, and car payments on vehicles they don't need, and suddenly there's significant flexibility in budgets that supposedly have no room to save. I'm not suggesting you eliminate all enjoyment from life. I'm pointing out that most people have never actually tracked where their money goes. They think they know, but they don't. Spend 1 month religiously tracking every single dollar. No judgment, just awareness. You'll be shocked at what you discover. That $5 daily coffee is $1,825 annually. That subscription service you forgot about is $180 yearly. The convenience of ordering delivery instead of cooking adds up to thousands. Once you have awareness, you can make intentional choices. Keep the coffee if it genuinely brings you joy, but cancel the gym membership you haven't used in 6 months. Redirect just 1/3 of unconscious spending toward savings, and you're looking at $10,000 in under 3 years without feeling deprived. The difference between people who save and people who don't usually isn't income. It's awareness and intentionality. Here's something beautiful about the savings journey. It gets progressively easier as you go. Your first $1,000 is absolutely brutal. It requires significant lifestyle adjustments and constant willpower. Every week feels like a battle against temptation. But your second 1,000 comes noticeably faster because you've already adapted to the lifestyle changes. By your third and fourth 1,000, the habits are becoming automatic. You're not white-knuckling through temptation anymore. You've genuinely reprogrammed your default behaviors. By the time you're working toward your 7th, 8th, 9th thousand, saving feels almost effortless. Not because it requires no discipline, but because the discipline has become part of your identity. You're not someone trying to save money anymore. You're a saver. That's fundamentally who you are now. And from that identity, the behaviors flow naturally. This is why the person who struggles to save their first $500 can often save their next $10,000 faster than they saved the first 1,000. The compound effect isn't just about money, it's about identity and momentum. Let's be brutally honest about what this milestone doesn't accomplish. Having $10,000 doesn't make you rich. You can't retire. You can't buy a house with cash. You're not going to quit your job and sail around the world. You'll still think twice before dropping $1,000 on some gadget you don't really need. This isn't about becoming wealthy overnight. It's about creating breathing room. But here's why that breathing room matters so much. It's the foundation for everything else. You can't build wealth while you're drowning financially. You can't invest wisely when you're stressed about groceries. You can't take career risks when you're terrified of missing rent. The $10,000 milestone doesn't solve all your problems, but it removes the financial terror that prevents you from solving your problems. It shifts you from survival mode to strategic mode. And that shift is where real wealth building begins. Think about it like oxygen. Having enough oxygen doesn't make you superhuman, but being oxygen deprived makes everything impossible. Financial breathing room works the same way. It's not the destination. It's the prerequisite for reaching any meaningful destination. Once you have this foundation, you can start thinking about investments, retirement accounts, real estate, business opportunities. Not because you suddenly have enough money to do all these things, but because you finally have the mental bandwidth to learn about them and pursue them intelligently. Something fascinating happens when you build your emergency fund that goes way beyond finances. Your physical health improves. Studies show people with financial security have lower blood pressure, stronger immune systems, and longer life expectancies. Your relationships strengthen because money stress is no longer poisoning your interactions. Your work performance improves because you're not mentally exhausted from constant financial anxiety. You become a better parent because you're more patient and present with your kids. You become a better friend because you can actually show up for people instead of being consumed by your own stress. You become a better partner because financial arguments, one of the leading causes of divorce, decrease dramatically. The money itself didn't create these improvements. The removal of financial stress created the space for these improvements to emerge naturally. And here's something wild. People often report feeling more generous after building their emergency fund. Not less generous, more generous. Because when you're financially secure, you can help others without jeopardizing your own stability. You can lend a friend $100 without panicking about your own bills. You can donate to causes you care about. You can pick up the check without resentment. Financial security doesn't make people selfish. It removes the scarcity mindset that forces people to be selfish for survival. Here's the real secret about saving your first $10,000. The money matters far less than the person you become while saving it. You develop discipline. You build patience. You learn to distinguish between genuine needs and manufactured wants. You become comfortable delaying gratification. You get creative about generating value. You become someone who keeps commitments to themselves. These character traits are worth infinitely more than the $10,000 sitting in your account. Because once you've developed them, you can rebuild that $10,000 if you lose it. You can build the next $10,000. And the next. The money is renewable. The identity transformation is permanent. This is why people who build savings through discipline almost never permanently return to being broke, even if they face major setbacks. They've become different people at a fundamental level. So if you're staring at a bank balance that looks more like a PIN code than a savings account, don't panic. Start small. $25, $50, whatever you can manage consistently. Focus on becoming someone who saves, not on the amount you're saving. The amounts will grow naturally as your identity solidifies. And when you finally see that five-figure balance for the first time, you'll realize the number itself was never the point. The point was the transformation required to get there. That transformation is what changes everything. If this perspective on money changed how you think about savings, hit that subscribe button. I break down the psychology behind financial decisions every week, and trust me, the next video might just save you from the biggest money mistake most people make without even realizing it.